Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you all. So today we're coming back to Tri-Brigade Spright, finally. It's definitely been a while since I have featured this deck on the channel, and a lot of the reason that I've been waiting to feature this deck is for exactly the release of Spright Sprint. This one card definitely changes the whole dynamic of not only how Sprights as a whole play, but definitely how Tri-Brigade Spright plays in particular. This variant was desperately needing this card a lot more than a lot of the other variants because Sprint actually does a very good job of setting up the graveyard and a lot of combo plays. Being able to send any level 2 monster from the deck to the graveyard is not only good because we have Kitt, which has some natural synergy, but honestly, at least the way that I've been playing it anyway, the vast majority of the time, I don't even end up sending the Kitt with Sprint. I'm sending Nimble Angler instead, and this is not going to just be true of Tri-Brigade Spright, but also Pure Spright, which we're going to cover tomorrow. Nimble Angler is going to be a very common inclusion in pretty much any Spright variant moving forward. Well, not any, but a lot of Spright variants moving forward because of its ability to summon not one, but 2 Nimble Beavers directly from the deck when sent to the graveyard from the deck via the Spright Sprint here. So, yeah, the ability to set up 2 level 2 beast monsters is not only, of course, good for Spright plays, but it also sets up, again, beast monsters in the graveyard for your Tri-Brigade plays. So, again, the vast majority of the time, I don't even really find myself binning the Kitt, normally just the Angler to set up some Beavers there. Otherwise, I mean, this is pretty much the same list, you know, obviously tuned to the current ban list that we've been using before. In fact, I've even included a card in here that I haven't included in quite some time in a lot of decks, and it's Nibiru. I haven't actually drawn this yet when it's been relevant, but I've mentioned this a couple of times in previous videos. I think that moving forward, it's going to be smart to start including Nibiru in your deck again, because we're very much moving away from a tier limits focused meta and into one where Nibiru is not only pretty good naturally, but also a lot of people, honestly myself included for the most part, but a lot of people have just kind of forgotten this card exists and will just play right into it. I've noticed that even people who play decks that have natural counters or have the ability to naturally play around it, like Spright, going into Gigantic has the ability to naturally counter this card. Flaunderies can do their main combo in 4 normal summons, but a lot of these decks that normally would very often play around Nibiru aren't really doing it anymore. They're taking greedier lines that do more summons because Nibiru hasn't been relevant for so long that it's not on anybody's radar. And while this card isn't particularly great against tier limits, it's not always useless against the deck either. Though this will, of course, trigger tier limit monster effects. They often end on boards, or just have boards in general, that consist of mostly non-tier limit monsters. So, again, I haven't actually drawn this card yet, where, like, honestly at all, period. But I am definitely going to keep including it and just testing and seeing how useful it is in the current metagame. I suspect it could be quite good there. We have a couple of new inclusions to the extra deck. The Mannequin Cat, I will admit, is also something that I've not really found myself summoning yet. It's in most deck lists from what I can tell of Tri-Brigade Spright decks, so I decided to toss it in and see how I liked it, but again, I haven't summoned it yet, so I'm honestly planning on just taking this out, unless there's an obvious interaction that I'm missing, which I very well could be. It seems that, again, a lot of the decks that are, you know, playing or a lot of the people who are playing Tri-Brigade Spright post-Sprint are including Mannequin Cat in their extra deck without any particularly obvious, like, you know, we don't have any, like, big floodgate monster to bring out against, like, popular decks or anything, but, I mean, there's obviously still the utility aspect, but, I don't know, I could see myself taking this out, again, unless somebody wants to point out an obvious interaction that I'm just missing with it here. The Scareclaw Light-Heart is another inclusion. I was going to craft this anyway. I ended up crafting this for the format skipper deck, but I was going to craft it anyway for this deck. It's come up every now and then. It's nice to have the option to just banish one out of the graveyard, and then, because sometimes, like, you know, you'll end up in a situation where your Fraktall gets negated, right, but you still have a couple of Tri-Brigade monsters in hand. You could potentially summon one of them, banish your Fraktall, summon this, and then link them off for, you know, like a Ferrijit or something. So, the Light-Heart is a very niche card in the extra deck, but it's one that can pretty easily come up here. Oh, another, I guess I will say an inclusion to the main deck that we weren't really playing before is Spright Gamma Burst. I haven't always been the biggest fan of this card, even in pure sprites in the past, but lately I have found myself including it a lot more often. I think it's a pretty good card, and it's just very nice to have a very convenient way to close out the game a lot of the time. You can just set up what would normally be a pretty mediocre board, and then you can just slap down a Gamma Burst, and then all of a sudden it's lethal, and that's pretty rad. So I liked it in pure Spright when I was testing it, and decided to try it in Tri-Brigade Spright, and it definitely has not disappointed. Otherwise, I don't really think there's too much like out of the ordinary going on. Only one Fire Formation Tenki in this build. This is a card that in past Tri-Brigade decks I would pretty much always play at 3, but the Fraktall line is actually much less important to this particular variant now. Again, mostly because of Sprin's ability to set up our not only set up our graveyard with multiple Nimble Beavers, but our field as well. So it's like, yeah, the Fraktall line definitely becomes much less important. It's still nice, though, to be able to start your turn by discarding Fraktall, because most people will still just drop an Ash Blossom on it when there are much better targets to Ash Blossom in the deck now. So, yeah, with Fraktall being less important, don't really need as many Tenkis. I could honestly see cutting this card altogether, maybe for like a third Imperm, just to have some more disruption, but yeah, that's pretty much the state of the deck right now. I really like it. One thing I will say is that in the games coming up, you might not always see me make optimal combo lines. I'm very much still trying to figure out what I want my main combo lines in this deck to be. I've been trying to do my research, but it's a little bit more difficult with this particular deck, Tri-Brigade Spright in Master Duel, because we have a very unique combination of cards, notably Sprind and Elf, and we do not have Pit Knight Airly, which the TCG very often uses in order as a piece of their end board for this deck. So, been trying to like figure out my own combo lines. So once I know like this is the optimal combo line, I'll definitely make an updated deck profile, or not deck profile, but just an updated video on this deck in general where we'll go over that. But in the meantime, we still have some quality games to show off, and I'll show you what kind of inboards this deck can spit out. It's pretty ridiculous, actually. So let's go ahead and break the list down card by card, and then we'll look at those games. We're playing 2 Tri-Brigade Nervall, 3 Maxx, 2 Nimble Angler, 3 Nimble Beaver, 2 Tri-Brigade Kerass, 3 Tri-Brigade Kitt, 2 Spright Blue, 3 Spright Jet, 1 Spright Red, 1 Spright Carrot, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Tri-Brigade Fraktall, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Fire Formation Tenki, 2 Call by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, 2 Spright Starter, 1 Spright Gamma Burst, 1 Spright Smashers, 2 Infinite Impermanence, and then 1 Tri-Brigade Revolt. That is our main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 number 29 Mannequin Cat, 1 Gigatic Spright, 1 Salamangreat Almiraj, 1 Scareclaw Light-Heart, 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Ancient Warriors Oath Double Dragon Lords, 1 Tri-Brigade Ferrijit the Baron Blossom, 1 Tri-Brigade Bearbrum the Rampant Rampager, 2 Spright Elf, 1 Spright Sprind, 1 Tri-Brigade Rugal the Silver Sheller, 1 Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess, 1 Accesscode Talker, and then finally, of course, 1 Tri-Brigade Churg the Ominous Omen. Alright, there's our list. Let's look at some gameplay now. Alright, so our first duel is going to be against Rika Sun Avalon, and I wanted to feature this game because I feel like this is a great example of showing, like, the stupid amount of interaction you can end on with this deck. So, I'm going to be taking the first turn, starting with a couple of sprites and a Fraktall. Gonna start with the Fraktall by pitching that. Opponent is going to fire off the Ash Blossom. I did mention this earlier in the video, earlier in the deck profile itself, that Tri-Brigade Fraktall is great Ash Blossom bait because a lot of people will still pretty much respond to it once they see it being dropped, and it is definitely much less important now than it has been in the past. So, as you can see, I'm going to start off by just dumping out all the Spright monsters in my hand and then going into a Sprind. Sprind is going to send the Angler, which is then going to pop out a couple of Nimble Beavers. I'm going to overlay one of those Beavers with the Sprind itself in order to make Gigatic Spright. Need to do that if you're going to go into Sprind first, because you cannot use Sprind as a leak material, very similar to Spright Elf. So, in order to get out of the extra monsters, we're going to do that. Then go into a Spright Elf afterward. That way we can establish it on the board. Now, one of the things that is really weird about comboing with this deck is keeping in mind your restrictions on your Tri-Brigade cards. Once you use the effect to banish monsters with a Tri-Brigade effect like Kitt, you can only use Tri-types, which is Winged Beast, Beast, and Beast Warrior, the 3 types that Tri-Brigades cover, you can only use Tri-types as linked materials. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that once you use Bear Brim's effect, you can only special summon Tri-Brigade monsters for the rest of the turn. So often what I try to do when I'm comboing with this deck is just making sure that we're getting all of our non-Tri-Brigade summons pretty much out of the way first. So that's why I decided to establish the Spright Elf and the IP Masquerena, as well as the Red in this case. Now that we've gotten everything that's not really Tri-Brigade stuff set up, and also keep in mind, like, even if we were to like stop here, this is not a terrible end board, but we're going to be able to do much better. So now we're going to go ahead and fire off the Tri-Brigade Kitt. I'm going to banish 2 of those in order to bring out my Bear Brim, and then link those 2 off in order to make a Ferrijit. When it comes to the Tri-Brigade stuff and how it interacts with the sprites, this is where I get a little more iffy on, like, am I really doing, like, the optimal combo line? So far the lines I've been doing have been good enough, but I definitely would like to definitely showcase some more optimal lines. Like here in particular, I feel like I need another, like, well, I'll let the turn play out here, but I feel like you need another, like, generic Link 2 in order to get the Ferrijit off the board. That's definitely something I'm missing, or maybe the answer is just to, like, I don't know. Again, I'll have to, like, work on the combo line and kind of, like, figure it out. So while I wouldn't call this an optimal turn 1 combo, I definitely think you could do better. This is definitely still not bad, right? Like, we have an IP plus Elf setup. We have the random Ferrijit on the board, but we can also get this off the board with not only IP, but also Red or Carrot, both of which we have set up. We don't have enough room to activate Revolt just yet, but we have plenty of disruption before then between these 3 cards, so I'm not particularly concerned about that. Plus, all 3 of these forms of disruption will also take multiple cards off the board, so yeah, as you can see here, I'm going to start off with this Spright Carrot, get rid of this Ferrijit, and then I'm also going to fire off the Elf. My opponent's going to end up responding with Call By, completely fine. I don't care about this Spright Blue resolving at all. That's great to get an extra card out of the opponent's hand here. So I decided to just go ahead and fire off the IP Masquerena while I'm at a 2 in this chain link. That way I can set up a 2-material Appaloosa for even more negates on my opponent's turn. Call By is going to banish the Spright Blue. That Elf is going to bring back again. I do not care about that in the slightest. And now, more importantly, Carrot is going to not only negate but also destroy the Rika Sun because we sent a Link 2 monster. So when my opponent normal summons the Rika Petal, I'm going to fire off the Revolt. Only need 3 spaces because I summoned a Ferrijit, you know, manually, I guess, so to speak. I didn't use a Tri-Brigade effect to special summon her. Here comes Shurg, the Ominous Omen. Effect is going to activate. I'll chain block it with the Baron Blossom, but I don't suspect they're going to have a response for it anyway. So even managed to get an Ash Blossom off of it. Very nice. Going to banish that Rika Petal, but it's going to throw out an unexpected die, which was actually unexpected, but thankfully I just top decked that Ash Blossom in order to go ahead and stop that right there. So just trying to keep my opponent from getting the Sunseed on the board, but my opponent actually has a Sunvine Sowing as the last card. So here's a Sunseed Genius Loki, but now it's their last card, and as soon as they summon this Dryas, I'm just going to go ahead and use my Appaloosa to negate it. It's not going to be that big of a deal at all. And now my opponent is out of cards, and I haven't even used Spright Red or one of my Appaloosa's negates, although I think I am about to end up using one of them here, yeah, for the second Dryas effect. So yeah, our opponent played through our opponent's whole hand and then some, and still had a monster negate left over. So I would dare say that is a very, very good setup for turn 1 there. Yeah, as we go into our turn, opponent's just going to go ahead and concede. Basically, the plan was just to make Accesscode Talker from here. Could have done so very easily and then battled for lethal. So, again, wanted to showcase that game first because I feel like it's a pretty good example of the potential that this deck has to put out a lot of disruption on turn 1, which is very, very strong. So, let's go ahead and take a look at our next game here. Alright, this next game is against Fluanderies. One thing I will kind of say about Tri-Brigade Spright is that this deck, more than other Spright variants, ends up being more susceptible to graveyard hate because, of course, the Tri-Brigade effects very much care about the graveyard, whereas the Sprights do a little bit, but can definitely play around their stuff getting banished. So, opponent's going to start off with a Pot of Duality, going to grab themselves a Dimensional Fissure. Thankfully for me, the reveals off that Duality actually weren't too great. They're going to go ahead and throw out the Fluanderies and Eaglin here, but I've got an Infinite Impermanence to stop that in its tracks. So no extra normal summons, no searching for any big birds. They're going to activate the Dimensional Fissure and set a card before passing back over to me. So set card could be any number of things. It could be a Dreaming Town, could be an Imperm, could be a Call By. It's actually going to end up being a Harpy's Featherstorm, which is Imperm Plus. So no Nimble Beaver effect for me. I'm going to go ahead and throw out this Spright Starter for a red and then just enter Battle Phase to battle over the Eaglin. My thought process here is that I want to, of course, battle over the Eaglin and make sure that they're not able to very easily amass 2 birds on the board in order to start tribute summoning. But also, by using the starter for the red, I now also have an ability, or the ability, to negate one of their Flandre's effects if they do happen to top deck like Rabina. I'm not going to toss out the Spright Blue here because the effects won't activate because of the Harpy's Featherstorm, and I don't think the extra damage is worth wasting the blue here. I'd rather keep it in my hand for potential use for the follow-up turn here. I'm going to set a Call By before passing just in case you never know. But it's going to Harpy's Featherduster, that's totally fine. Just going to get rid of the Call By, which doesn't really do anything in this matchup anyway. So I plan to use it on like an Ash Blossom or something, but if it's going to be Harpy's bait, that's fine too. So special summoning a Spright Blue, going to grab myself a Jet. Jet's effect is going to summon itself and then grab a Gamma Burst. Normal summoning the Nimble Angler. I technically have enough bodies on board for lethal, but I just want to make sure that we're playing around this last back row just in case. It ends up being Book of Moon here. So I was going to grab Carrot with a Gigantic Spright, but even with these 3 Spright monsters plus the Gamma Burst, that's already enough damage right there. Just go ahead and smack for lethal. So this game we didn't really do much Tri-Brigade stuff, mostly because of that Dimensional Fissure, but also just because the way we opened in our hand played out. But all the same, we were able to find a pretty easy lethal, again, thanks to the Gamma Burst there. As you can see, that's a lot of the reason why I like Gamma Burst is beyond a turn 1, it's just so easy to just be like, even through Interruption, like you saw there, just be like, alright, I'll just Special Jet, search a Gamma Burst, and smack you for lethal. So, good stuff. Alright, we have a couple more games to look at, so let's go straight to this next one here. Alright, now we have a mirror match, so it's going to be 2 Tri-Brigade Spright decks here. My opponent's actually on a Link monster that I saw in a few decks, but ended up kind of dismissing and putting in a second Spright Elf instead. That's a Firefighting Darukma, something like that. By the way, opening the rare brick with this hand here. Yeah, it's pretty hard to brick with this deck. You have a lot of live plays, but unfortunately this hand did not have one of those. But let's go start off with the Nimble Beaver, but I thankfully have the Crossout Designator. I'm glad I set that for pretty much this exact reason, being able to stop a mirror match deck there. Or some Spright variant, you know, I could have, if they had started with like a, especially a blue, for example, I could have just banished that, but yeah, I didn't think the Darukma doll was going to be that great because it doesn't really have a relevant effect, but I have found that in like playing these combo lines, you do often need just an extra link too. It's like I was talking about earlier, right? Just to get that Ferrijit off the board, and the Darukma doll is one that you can make while you're locked into Tri-Brigade effects, or not into Tri-Brigade effects, into only using Tri-types as materials. So, yeah, I threw in a second Spright Elf because I was like, oh, the Elf is just a better link too, but turns out you do actually need that random monster to go into. That's going to be for further testing though. In any case, for this game, opponent's going to Imperm my Nimble Beaver. Slightly annoying, but I do already have the Jet in my hand as well, so unlike my opponent who, you know, once I negated their Nimble Beaver, they thankfully didn't have any more Spright monsters in hand to continue their plays. So gonna go for the Sprint here. Sprint F to send the Angler. Angler F to special 2 more Beavers. Opponent's going to fire off a Maxx. I'm going to chain the Spright Starter to get in another summon. But I've got the Gamma Burst in my hand, so at this point I'm pretty much committed to just finding lethal here. So it shouldn't be too difficult, honestly. Oh, that's right, I only have the 1 Nimble Beaver. I kind of misplayed here because I forgot I only had 1 Nimble Beaver left in my deck. So that Sprint line didn't even really end up being that great to go for. I'm going to give my opponent a few draws just because, again, I'm already going for lethal here. I'm going to activate the Gigantic Spright's effect. Opponent's got an Ash Blossom to stop it, but you know, I'm adding up what I have on field, and I'm like, this is fine, right? Like, I'm looking at my field, and I'm like, surely I have lethal here. There's no way I don't have lethal, but I actually totally forgot that Gamma Burst would also boost my opponent's Nimble Beaver, and I end up being 100 points of damage off. It's so brutal. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any way I could have battled. I'm sure there was. I'm sure I could have actually found lethal there and accounted for the extra 100 points of damage had I actually taken the time to read my cards and do math. But I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh player. Can you really expect me to do either? So that was a pretty interesting concede from my opponent. They went to normal summon the Tri-Brigade Kitt. I activated Elf and targeted the red, and they immediately snap conceded. I guess my opponent's hand was just about as dead as mine was. Like, right, wasn't this the game where I only opened Jet? Yeah. Because, again, when we negated their Beaver, that was it. They stopped that turn, and then in the face of, again, just one disruption here, they just conceded. So I guess this was a case of, like, my hand wasn't great, but my opponent's hand actually somehow managed to even be a little bit worse there. Yeah, we still have one more duel, though, so let's go ahead and go straight into it. And for our final duel, we're going to be up against Tier Elements, but we're not playing against just any Tier Elements deck. This is a Tier Elements deck that's featuring a Winged Dragon of Ra package, and they're not just playing, like, one or two cards. They've got, like, they've got Sphere Mode, they've got the Guardian Slime, they've got the Sun God's whatever continuous spell. They definitely have a full Ra engine. I don't think they actually had like any of the like the Immortal Phoenix mode or anything like that, or like just vanilla Winged Dragon of Ra, but they definitely do have like a package, a notable package. So I'm going to start off by doing a combo line here that I've been doing regularly now, you know, starting off with the Sprint, sending the Angler. Opponent's got a Kelbeck to bounce back the Sprint. I'm not super concerned about that, just because I normally just use Sprint as a material for the Gigantic here anyway, but hopefully that doesn't end up being too disruptive there. So I'm going to throw out the starter for blue, blue adding the red. Now we're going to link these two off in order to get ourselves the Elf. Specialing the red, using Elf effect to bring back the blue. Going to link these two off now for our IP Masquerena. Again, I'm just trying to set up as much of our non-Tri-Brigade stuff first as possible before going into the Tri-Brigade stuff. So banishing 2 for Ferrijit and then linking into Bearbrum. I was just kind of experimenting because normally I do it the other way around, but here I was just kind of like experimenting and seeing, you know, how I like doing it this way. Again, a lot of these games are just me trying to figure out what exactly the best combo lines to do, where, again, I think I am missing in this extra deck a good link to link off, like in this case, the Bearbrum here. Although I guess we're able to do that anyway. We can just go for Sprint right here, because it got bounced back by the Kelbeck. But this is where I was saying earlier, like, if I had, like, the Firefighting Drukma doll or something like that, just another generic link to go into, that would be nice. So, opponent's gonna start off, like, we actually, here's the thing too, right? I want to point out, we had a very good setup, relatively speaking, for our opponent's tier limit board, right? You know, we did get disrupted, but even still, we still had the red, the IP, and the Elf. Elf had, of course, a ton of things to bring back, including some more searching with blue or jet, but opponent actually starts off with Raw Sphere Mode, and that's definitely going to be, no bueno. That's no good. I will say, I think this is a pretty interesting alternative to playing, like, evenly matched, is playing the Raw Sphere Mode. Not only the Raw Sphere Mode, but also, again, we're going to see more Raw cards coming up here, if more haven't already been milled. Let me actually check my opponent's mills. Yeah, none yet. Oh, they're on Ghost Spell, too. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and throw out the Ash Blossom for the Kiklos Search, and then I'm also going to throw out the Revolt to banish the Kiklos as well. This all might have been done a bit early, honestly, but my opponent's already used their normal summon, so I'm like, you know, we'll just go ahead and do this here. I figured it would probably not be super easy for my opponent to extend and keep playing after this, but I definitely end up being wrong. I think I should have just been paying more attention, because I think they end up searching a Shiren, right? Yeah, they searched a Shiren earlier. Oh, but they've already used it. Never mind. Ah, it's a triple tack. I was trying to remember, like, what card screws me over here. It's a triple tack. That's what it was. Alright, so, you know, after I played this game, when I was thinking about this replay, basically, I was, you know, thinking, like, okay, how could I have played this game better? And that was, like, again, as it tends to be sometimes, that was one of my main motivations for, like, showing this replay on the video there. Okay, here is the true Sun God here to add the Guardian Slime. And at this point, I'm like, okay. But yeah, looking back here, it was really a combination of not only the raw sphere mode, but that triple attack. Were it not for both, even if my opponent had one or the other, were it not for both, I think I could have played out of this a lot more easily. But here I'm just going to go for a quick Accesscode Talker, which actually doesn't end up being the best thing to go for here, because unfortunately, even though I can pop my Shurg and get a search for a Kerass here, Accesscode Talker, I totally didn't even think about this, only has one link arrow pointing down into the zone that raw sphere mode is in. Good board placement on my opponent's part if that was intentional. I'm not sure if it was or not, but that's actually definitely going to block me from being able to find lethal here, because normally I would just be able to, you know, use this Kerass to banish a bunch of Tri-types and just kind of go for it. But I can't pop the sphere mode either with Accesscode Talker, because Accesscode can only pop opponents' cards. And unfortunately, with, you know, this Dark running them over, they get to search a tier limit monster here, so now I just kind of have to hope that they don't top deck another monster and be able to activate this Shiren. But oh yeah, they're sacking the Guardian Slime off for an Egyptian God Slime, using the Guardian Slime to add the True Sun God Ra, now activating the Shiren and pitching a Havness that they end up top decking. So unfortunately for me, the top decking monster, on top of having triple attack, on top of having the raw sphere mode, although to be fair, again, at least with the raw sphere mode, they were playing a whole engine for it. So yeah, I mean, taking a loss of tiers, but at least this one had a unique spin on it. So that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Let's go ahead and move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me, not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There, for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack, you'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now, so without further ado, this is XLex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.